Hey, what's up guys? It's yours truly. And today I'm going to be talking about a movie that's going to be released publicly everywhere next Wednesday on Netflix. I actually got to see an early screening of it. We're talking about Martin Scorsese's The Irishman. So The Irishman is based off of a 2004 book called I Paint Houses. So this follows a character by the name of Frank Sheeran, a World War II veteran who recounts his life being wrapped around the mafia. And let me just tell you, if someone in the mafia, Irish, Italian, whatever, says I paint houses, you know they don't actually paint houses. So this movie stars Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, who I haven't seen in anything in years since, what was that? Oh, one of the later Lethal Weapon movies. And of course, Ray Romano. So when I saw the trailers for this movie, I knew what I was getting myself into. Some good action, good shootouts, funny ass mafia humor, and honestly just grade A acting and just amazing dialogue between these characters. Certain characters like Joe Pesci, who you may be just familiar with Lethal Weapon or Home Alone, or My Cousin Vinny. I think he was in Goodfellas. He might have been. That's another classic movie that's on my list. I still got to get around to seeing that one. But Joe Pesci plays this mob boss all around Atlantic City, Philly, and all these other areas, which is funny because that's exactly where I'm from and that's exactly where I saw this movie in Philadelphia. It's so interesting seeing the life of a mob boss because when he bumps into Robert De Niro's character, Frank Sheeran, he's just trying to help him out with fixing his car. He's sweet, he's a very kind man. And then he meets up with him a little later and then Robert De Niro really gets a look into his actual world. Family means everything to him. But if you mess with him... By the way, it is worth mentioning that Joe Pesci is playing Russell Bufalino of the Bufalino crime family. So further going into detail about their relationship, there is jobs that Russell wants Frank to do. Frank might not want to do them. Tough shit. You see their relationship go from love to hate to regret to just all around despising each other, and then it turns around, forgive, forget. It's just a crazy roller coaster with these two. A third of the way through the movie, in comes Jimmy Hoffa. He's an actual figure in history. He was a big supporter of union workers and a leader of that as well. And Al Pacino does a great job of portraying this character. And I know you guys are going to be like, what the hell when you hear this? But I've actually never seen Scarface. But seeing him in this, seeing how iconic his character is in this movie, and how funny he is as well, makes me want to go back and watch that movie. I mean, every single line in this movie is, cocksucker this, cocksucker that, he's a cocksucker. Man, oh my gosh. It's just so entertaining when he's on screen. I've seen a few of Martin Scorsese's films. I've seen Hugo, I've seen Shutter Island. So generally, I've actually liked his films. He's been under a little bit of fire recently because he's talking all this shit on Marvel films. And I honestly can understand where he's coming from because there's a lot of Marvel films and just superhero films in general that are just bland and don't stand out. I don't want to get too off topic. Like he's watching this, but Martin, if you haven't seen Captain America, Winter Soldier, Avengers Infinity War, Endgame, and I at least say there's a good 10 Marvel Studios films that are excellent, top tier. I hope you change your heart at some point, man. Martin Scorsese does an almost perfect job with this film. This is 3.5 hours long, and I saw it in theaters, and unfortunately, unlike The Hateful Eight by Quentin Tarantino, this did not have an intermission. 3.5 hours sitting in a theater. Whew! The first third of this movie did drag a little bit. I feel like there's certain things he could have removed from the first act because it's all just kind of more mafia stuff here, more mafia stuff there, funny stuff. It's all good. It's not like it's terrible stuff, but I think that definitely would have benefited from like an extended version or something like that. 3.5 hours, just maybe shave off like 15-20 minutes in the first act. A lot of stuff in the second and third acts were crucial and necessary. Some of the best scenes in this movie is seeing all the mafia's tricks to the trade and how they retaliate against the city. They're literally getting a bunch of guys and flipping all these taxi cabs in the river. There is a certain point under a bridge where they throw all their guns and they pan down to a shot where there's literally like 300 guns just dumped in the river. The coolest thing for me that I saw in this movie is they're talking about what type of guns to use when they carry out hits later on that night, and they're basically just like, don't use that gun. Cops are going to hear that 6 blocks away. You're going to get in trouble. So just use a gun where people within 2 blocks will hear it and run away, but you're still going to be able to carry out your job with no witnesses. And you got to figure, all these guys figured out these tricks by trial and error. I mean, tons of them probably got arrested, tons of them probably got away with it, and they all just swap stories with one another to learn how to do these things successfully. Ray Romano plays a lawyer, and he's Russell Bufalino, Joe Pesci's character. He's his cousin in the movie, and it really shows how many connections these mafia bosses have. Ray Romano's just like, I'm here to protect you either way. He's just like, whether you did it or not. And Robert De Niro's just like, okay, cool. And he's just like, Robert De Niro's just like, you want to know if I did it or not? I love just how stubborn a lot of these characters are and how they'll take some of their secrets to the grave. And it just makes for some great lighthearted moments in this 3.5-hour crime drama. This is a mild spoiler, but one of the funniest parts in this movie is how Jimmy Hoffa, Al Pacino's character, reacts to JFK's death. They're flying the flag at the Union headquarters at half-mast, and he's just like, what the f? Him and his guys go up there right away and pull the flag up to full mast, and it's just like, wow, this dude's such an asshole. I love it. And since it's Martin Scorsese, he's utilizing so many practical effects. A lot of the restaurants he went to in Philadelphia are actually still there. They might not look like how they did in the movie. They might have a little bit of a modernized look. I actually don't know. Maybe I'll stop by there. The only CGI or visual effects that I saw that were really noticeable was when they were trying to make Robert De Niro look a lot younger than he actually was. His skin just looked a little bit too smooth and like rubbery, like they didn't like CGI in pores or something like. It just definitely looked off. There's tons of other actors and actresses in this film that do an amazing job. Bobby Cannavale, it's probably Cannavale because it's an Italian-based mafia movie. You know the guy from Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, and the Ant-Man films. Anna Paquin's also in this, the girl from True Blood and X-Men, of course. And there's tons of actors that play iconic characters that we know in history. Don Rickles, the famous comedian, rest his soul, is in this movie just for a little bit. The guy doesn't necessarily sound like him too much, but he does capture his look and comedic tone for way back then, and throughout his whole life, actually. There's even a guy who plays Fat Tony. Yes, the guy from The Simpsons is based off of an actual mafia character in history. Who would have thought? There's not really too much more to say about this film. I will say it's kind of like a Quentin Tarantino movie to where it's so impactful and so memorable, you only really need to see it once. Hateful Eight, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, only saw it once, only need to see it once. It's just that good. The entire cast made this film. The action was good. The comedy was on point and well-timed. I'll just say this. I was glad growing up that my family lived on the outskirts of Philly and not in the dead center where all this stuff was going on. The movie has a great soundtrack, a lot of tense moments, and a lot of twists and turns that you don't really expect. Robert De Niro, of course, is the star of this film. I mean, he had the Joker before this, and now this movie. It's his year, man. I will say, probably wait to see it on Netflix so that you can pause it and take a pee, go up to get food, and just do you. Because the runtime is really the only negative I had about this film. The Irishman is one of my favorite films of this year. I don't know where I'd place it on my list. We'll figure it out in a few months. This movie, The Irishman, gets a 9 out of 10.